Woodturners. It's so nice that they're come here for a demo. And they are doing a bunch of other events, everything from, was it Hanover?
We're not doing Hanover Day, but we are doing the Cohasset Art Festival, which is in June. Next week, we're at West Father's Day weekend. We're in West Bridgewater the first Sunday in June for the West Bridgewater Riverwalk, which is a new event this year. We'll be at the Marshfield Fair in August. And in September, I believe, is going to be the Corn Festival at the Norwell Science Center, which is actually going to happen in Hanover this year because they're doing construction. And we're at the Arnold Arboretum in October for Woodturners exhibition there.
Okay. Then you can see it, you can hear about more of those events by going to their website.
Okay. Thank you very much, Zoe. My name is Joe Centorino. I am the president of the club. That's what happens when you make eye contact during a meeting. Joined the club in 2017, and I was a new turner at the time. So on my left, this is Jeff Keller, who's been a longtime member of the club and who's organized this event with the Norwell Library and the display that we've had out in the hallway here since beginning of the year, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And we have Bill Dooley, another member, and Ken Whiting. So these are one small fragment of the club. We've got about 80 members. Let me pass these out. That's all right. We're not going to elect you, although my reign is up. There you go. This is Michael Waddell. He's another member of our club. He's a shill in the audience. So what I'm going to try and do is very briefly explain about the club and the craft of wood turning. I'll take a few minutes to do that, and then I'm going to invite people, come on up, get up close and personal, watch what's going on up here, ask questions. You can look at items we have some items that are for sale here, and I have a bunch of props here that's great. We have magazines, American Woodturner. These go back quite a few years, and feel free to look through them, take them if you want. There's also in one of them, special is one of the projects we did with a sister club in England, and I'll explain that as well. So, as I said, we are a club that was founded in 1997 in Abington. The original founding president was Henry Cahill, and we meet still at the same place. It's his barn, his workshop at his residence in Abington. And prior to that club being formed, they used to travel out to Worcester to go to a wood turning meeting out there, and somebody said, why are we doing that? Why don't we set up our own? So in February of 1997, they got chartered with the American Association of Woodturners. And Hank welcomed, they were doing lathe work, carving, all sorts of woodworking and wood turning activities. And unfortunately, Hank passed in 2012, long before I even joined the club. But we still meet at the same place. His children own the facility. It's not a maker's space. We don't have access to it all the time. We have monthly meetings there, and we have one-on-one mentoring. It's called a hands-on, one Saturday a month. And that's where more experienced turners get paired with some newbies to teach them more about wood turning. and safety and all of that good stuff. So if you guys want to, you can start turning and I'll talk over you, it's okay. So wood turning, basically you have the wood mounted in a lathe. This is the basic lathe, turns the wood around and around. This is the headstock. This is the tailstock. This is called a banjo, and you have a tool rest. And it's one of the few wood shaping activities where the material is moving and the tool isn't. So you think of using a saw. Well, the saw is moving and you're just pushing the wood through it. A drill, the drill is moving. Here, the wood's moving and you're holding a tool up against it and taking away material. There are certain precautions. What you'll see here, we typically wear a wood turning smock. The idea behind it is that stops the dust and the wood chips from getting in under your shirt and all that. It doesn't work. And all of the pockets, even with flaps, they have a way of collecting all the wood chips. Typically wear short sleeves. What you're seeing here today is not strictly by the book, all right? These guys are not new turners. They know what they're doing, and the type of wood turning this is extremely safe. It's spindle turning. And spindle is, you've got a tree. So the wood is got grain going in it in vertical direction, and taking away wood from the side, that would be spindle turning. So you have a log, and picture this as an entire log, not just a half a log, and you're cutting along the side. It's a much safer orientation on the lathe. It's unlikely that it's going to bounce out and hit you or hit anybody else, but that's why we have the shields here, to protect the public. So you've got spindle turning, you've got bowl turning. So wood turning takes all different forms. Some of the items that you see here, Jeff turned this piece. Nice. I need it a little shorter, just a little shorter. But so this combines a lot of different skills on the lathe, just to even turn it, taper it, and do a twist, a barley twist in here that was done by hand, right, by Jeff?
Hand, yeah, a lot of work.
And you can do big items, and you can do small items on the same lathe. Did you do these on the? These were done on the same lathe. Yep. And you can turn some items that are, this is a segmented piece, so this is dried wood that's been glued together and then turned. I'm not a big fan of segmenting myself, but it's beautiful work and I can appreciate, but I don't have the patience to do something like this. And you can turn items that they don't even have to be round. So this was a piece of burl, and that you'll hear that word come up more than a few times. Does anybody know what a burl is or doesn't know what a burl is? Okay, so if you see a tree that has some bumps on the side, they may be burls. There's a lot of cherry burls and willow burls and even some oak burls. And what it is, it's like a wart on the tree. Ordinarily, in regular straight-grained wood, this is a piece of cherry. The grain is all very straight and orderly, has a very orderly pattern to it. In a burl, it's all over the place. It's chaos. It goes in all different directions. It will be less prone to cracking because the grain is going all different ways, and I could go on for a long time on the science of cracking and why wood cracks. But in a burl, because the grain is going every which way, it tends to be more stable. It doesn't shrink as much. And it's also kind of beautiful, like a snowflake. There's no two burls are the same. There are different types of burls. But this was a slab, and you can see that the grain patterns in this all different, it's just very organic. And when I was looking at this, I decided, well, it didn't need to be a bowl or a vase or even round. And to me, it looked like it was a mushroom, so I cut it up into pieces and made a mushroom and made a stem out of this from the stem of an Andromeda shrub and epoxied it on to the end. And then you've got small items again to large items. These are done on the same lathe. This is a piece of oak, and it's a work in progress. This was harvested 2 years ago, and you rough turn it on the lathe to about an inch or an inch and a quarter thick all the way around, and then you set it aside to dry. During that time, it changes shape. As it dries, it'll shrink on the side grain and not on the end grain. So this actually was oriented like this. So it was a big piece of oak, and the grain is running this way. So as it dried, it shrunk in on the sides and not on the top, so it became oval. And you have to turn it thick to begin with so that you can then go in after it's dried and put it on a lathe and true it up again to make it round. So I can pass this one around. It should be fairly, it's hefty, and when you think a cubic foot of green oak, so once it's first cut, is about 65 pounds per cubic foot. That's very heavy, and when you have that going on the lathe, you can see it's a whole lot more mass and momentum than a small piece of dried wood. One of the other protections that we use is a face shield. And this happens to be a powered face shield, so it's got a little motor in it, sucks in air, blows it down over my face so that it's nice and cool all the time, keeps out the dust, at least from my face, which works well. My glasses don't fog up, and the mask doesn't fog up. And I like wearing this. When people are turning spindles, if they don't have a JASP, if they're just using a regular face shield, sometimes it can get a little claustrophobic and they steam up and all of that. So a lot of the times doing spindle work, they'll wear just safety glasses. Again, because it's very, very very, very safe. So we have those tools. So speaking of tools, there are all sorts of gouges. These are the tools that we wind up using, holding on the tool rest against the wood, and it's rather sharp, so just be careful with it. That is a 3/8 inch bowl gouge, and it has a shape in it. That groove is called a flute, and it has a certain angle cut at the cutting edge, and we have jigs that we have to set up in order to sharpen the tools. You sharpen it, depends on what you're doing with it, how you're cutting, what kind of wood you're cutting, whether you drop the tool on the floor, or if you get lazy and you don't sharpen your tool, you'll find yourself trying to force the tool, and it does not give you a good cut. So new turners, we try to get them, and I include myself in that group. I've only been turning for 5 or 6 years. Want to sharpen more often so that you've got a nice sharp tool. Let the tool do the work. Other items, this is a box. I always thought a box was square. That's what a box is, you know. Boxes come from Amazon. For turning, this is a box, it's a lidded vessel. And what you try for is a fit, and I'll pass this around as well. When you open it, it gives a little pop. You don't want it to be too tight. And this has been decorated with a laser to do the designs on it. And you try to do that. You make boxes, especially lidded boxes, out of dry wood, because wet wood is going to dry, and when it dries, it changes shape. It goes from round to oval, depending upon the grain orientation. And what
do you mean by
wet wood means the moisture content of the wood is more than the surrounding environment. So when you cut down a tree or cut down a log, there's a lot of water in it. Even during the winter months, there is water in the tree. And when you cut it down, you will have a certain percentage of water. It could be 20%, 30%. Depends on the tree and where in the tree. You've got heartwood, and then sapwood is out here, and that's part of the living, well, all the tree is living, but that's the part that's growing, the cadmium layer. And then you get the bark. So, well, any tree all of those trees out there now are wet. If it's alive, it's wet. And if you cut down the tree,
Piece of beech that was cut a month and a half ago.
you can
I
feel
can
it.
feel the
Yeah.
moisture in it. So it may feel dry, but it's not freshly cut.
Here, I'll go this way. Why break up a pattern? So that's a piece of beech. It was just cut down a month ago, and I don't know if you can feel the moisture in it. No, go right ahead.
You have a piece that you can do this to, that dries out to the point that you want it to.
When there's a rule of thumb in milling lumber where they go by thickness, I don't know if it really applies depending upon the width of the piece. It's more the thickness.
Flat stock is typically
So if it's sitting there,
If you use a moisture meter, your wood will go down to about 7%. In the summertime, it can be as much as 21% when it's humid.
The point being, you have a machine that will measure
Well, actually, in flat work,
yeah,
boards, you can take a narrow strip of, say, an inch by an inch thick stock over, not with the grain, but across the grain, all glued together over a length. And if you measure it at different times of the year, you can tell how much moisture that piece picked up in the course of a season.
yeah, so the rings will tell you what the weather has been like, the amount
It's
of
like
moisture.
like a heat thermometer in reverse. It'll give you the percentage of what's in the moisture.
Yes, there are instruments for that purpose, right?
Or moisture meters that'll go in with, and they check the conductance. It's just a battery. Another way of doing it is you weigh it. So if you've got a small piece of wood like that blank and you weigh it, then put it in a situation where it's your normal environment. So you're not putting it in a kiln to dry it. And you'll see that it will lose weight over time. When it stops losing weight, it's at equilibrium with the environment, which is different than the kiln-dried wood. There they take and they force it to lose all the moisture, and they stack it in such a way that it won't twist as much and bend, and then they mill it, and that's the lumber that you get in the lumber yards and the box stores. And
one other thing, when it's wet, it turns like butter, wood does. It's way easier to turn than when it's dry. When it's dry, it also gets hot sometimes when you're cutting it. But conversely, when it's wet, that means it's going to distort and dry out and expand, and that's why you have to rough turn it as a rule to allow for the expansion and enough material in it to go ahead and finish it off after it gets dry enough to stop stretching itself out.
I might mention some of the tools that we use today. The older ones were carbon steel. Now the turning tools are typically high-speed steel. They hold an edge a lot longer. When you think about it, how many times this turns over your cutting edge versus taking a hand plane, for an example, running it over a piece of wood. It's a lot different having the wood going over the tool than it is putting the tool to the wood. So they've come out with all kinds of different, metallurgy, I'll say, technologies. The tool steels hold an edge a lot longer. A lot of them are cryogenically heat treated. It goes to 300 degrees below zero, and it does something to the makeup of the, the metals, and so it holds an edge longer. I don't know, I guess that's just something to mention.
so one of the things with new turners starting out, you say, well, gee, wood turning looks like fun. It's interesting. I want to get into it. How do I do that? These lathes are called a midi lathe. They've got 6 inches between the height of the spindle above the bed of the lathe, So theoretically, I could turn up to a 12-inch bowl. It's going to be a little bit less than that. But, and this is 21 inches long. You can buy smaller lathes that'll be just for making pens. And they're, you know, for a couple $100, you can get a pen lathe. You can buy pen kits. You don't need to buy a whole lot of different gouges, although that's half the fun is, oh, I need a new tool. They do sell these carbide, they're really scrapers. And there's 3 different shapes. There's a circular shape, there's a rounded square, that's for roughing, and then one that's a diamond point for doing detail work. And these have a replaceable carbide cutter. They call it a cutter. Like I said, it's really a scraper. You're not cutting with this. And they have an interchangeable into a handle. So these are a mid-size set. And as a new turner starting out, you could get a set of these. You don't need to buy a grinder and the grinding jig. You don't have to learn how to sharpen those tools. Not that there's anything wrong with that. If you want to do that, certainly there are dyed-in-the-wool wood turners, and we have them in the club, that say, oh no, this is the devil's work. Doing it with this. You have to learn how to sharpen it, and don't be that guy that has to use a jig to do it. That's not sharpening. I can do it by hand. And you're looking at people who have been turning for decades. And gee, oh, by the way, they're a machinist as well, so they're doing this all the time. I tried saying, oh yeah, I could do that, and try and do it by hand, and by the time I got done ruining one of my gouges, it was probably about this long and it wasn't sharp at all, so I said, why am I doing that? So I'm a firm believer is go, if what you want to do is to learn to turn, find the fastest way, the easiest way to do that, regardless of I'm trying to think of the words, not the elegance, but the adhering to, you know, strict code that, well, you have to use a gouge, you've got to do it by hand, and all that. No, that's fine. I'm not above using 80 grit sandpaper, even 40 grit sandpaper if I have to get rid of wood. Whatever takes the wood away, that's fine. That's shaping. Let's see.
Here's an example, Joe. Try to do that grind by hand and get repeatability. That's the advantage of a jig. And
hey, this is another tool, again, very, very sharp. But if you look at the,
yeah,
if you look at this at the top,
You guys can turn, you know.
Yeah.
when you're grinding, you're trying to sharpen the tool. You're not trying to change the shape.
Okay.
You
Well, I think
may,
they'd
when
like
you
to see
first get
something,
it,
too.
and you have a certain grind, a certain shape that you want to get on your tool. After that, you just want to do the same thing every time. So that's where a jig comes in very handy. You want to take off as little metal as possible and still get a sharp tool. Let's see. Any questions at all? Yes. Where do we get our wood? Well, we get contacted by people all over the place that say, oh, I've had a tree come down in my yard, and it would be really a shame to see it go to waste. I don't have a fire pit. I don't have a chainsaw. I don't want to deal with it. So they'll call somebody in the club. Or they'll say, I'm having a tree taken down. And we planted it when we first moved here, 300 years ago. And we would like to get something to remember the tree by. So they'll contact us and we can set them up with one of the turners to do a commission job, which could be bowls, it could be vases, it could be just about anything.
What's this thing
We
making
do not
noise?
take trees down. It's
Why is it making
insurance
noise?
liability, and we don't have the equipment to be felling trees. But we will once a tree is down, we will go and we have what's called a chainsaw party.
No,
And
it sounds like it.
we have one of our members who organizes it, and he's got, I don't know, 3 or 4 chainsaws and all the gear for bucking up the logs and making a wood blanks out of it. So people who want to turn things like that will turn items like this. Now you can go to Woodcraft or a whole number of online outlets and buy exotic woods. There are burls from Australia that are very expensive.
Oops.
And sometimes it does that. So you can buy kiln-dried wood, so it's going to be very stable in different sizes and thickness. You can get ebony. There are so many different types of wood
That looks good.
and species. And they're small pieces for 20
Shazam.
bucks, 30 bucks.
Yeah, how about
If you
that?
want to do that, if you want to do
Get that
pepper
effect by
shakers,
looking at it.
goblets, so you can buy wood that way. But generally, I don't think I've paid for a piece of wood in 5 years. Well, if you get an in with a tree company, and they'll hold on if they get burls,
Need a hand?
or if they get a really, really nice piece
I
of
got a good catch.
cedar,
Yeah, I
let's
know.
say. Because cedar is
in
beautiful,
there?
but
You want
it's
me to
not
help
really
you?
good for milling. If you got walnut,
And I'm done.
they can mill that.
Yeah.
And
There you
there
go.
are a few people around that have portable mills, and they will
Lefty
come.
loosey.
Found out what it was.
Lefty tighty.
Never had
I
this
think he's
water
turned.
one type.
Oh.
Are the mic's off again?
Oh, no, probably not.
Okay. Oh, I thought that's what you were doing. Excuse me just a moment. Hold on, Ken. There we go. Okay. So, sometimes if they have burls or if you've got a contact with someone, they'll say, hey, I've got this coming down. Are you interested? Another source for wood for us, and a matter of fact, we're going there Monday, is the Arnold Arboretum. We have an agreement, or we have an arrangement with them, all of the wood turning groups in the area. They go through and prune the trees there due to storm damage or growth or whatever, and they stockpile the wood, and a couple of, 2-3 times a year, they'll contact all of the wood turning clubs. And we go up there and they divvy up the different species of wood and give so much to each of the clubs. And then we will turn items, some of which goes back to the Arboretum as gifts. One of the members from our club gave a bowl back to the Arboretum that was gifted to Mayor Wu. And then a second bowl from the same guy wound up going to the Royals when they came, so it's in Buckingham Palace now. So we call him Sir William, the Royal Bowl Turner. We have fun with that. One of the one of the articles in the Wood Turning magazine was celebrating the 400th anniversary of Plymouth Rock and the Pilgrim's Landing. We have a sister club in Plymouth, England, and we turned a platter here, shipped it to England. They took and inscribed and engraved an image of the Mayflower at sea, and it's on display now in the Mayflower Museum in Plymouth, England, and that's in here. So that was pretty good. That was a fun thing to do. And our club also, we just this past January finished on a 2-year project. We were contacted by a Japanese American group called the New England Kenjinkai, and it is an organization sort of like a Sons of Italy for the Japanese Americans. And they had one of the ceremonies that they do at New Year's time is to make mochi, which is pounded sweet rice, and they make a paste out of it and can season it and do. It's very good, by the way. But they make it in what's called an usu, which is a giant mortar and pestle. So the unit they had was too big, too heavy, it was cracking, and they asked, they were looking for somebody to make them a new usu. And this was at the beginning of COVID, so didn't really have anything much else to do. So we started building making an usu out of a 500-pound piece of oak. And 2 years later, and about 445 pounds later, we wound up with an usu. It's in one of these magazines. I just couldn't find it real quick. But that was a 2-year project that we did for this group, and it was really a wonderful time giving them this project that we had done. And it's part of what we do. Is the club is really not about generating money. And see, we don't do a lot of sales. The biggest sales event we have is the Cohasset Art Festival. We do 10 days at the Marshfield Fair, and that's really just promoting wood turning. We show videos, we have a couple of lathes set up, we do demonstrations, we turn tops for the kids. And let people know what wood turning is, how to get into it, what does it cost to get into it. Our group, we have a lot of benefits like access to wood, access to skilled wood turners who are willing to instruct, and the same people in our club. Like there was a gentleman here earlier who's an instructor out at Snow Farm, and he's been instructing up at the, oh God, the name went right out of my head, museum in Brockton, Fuller Museum. So he's taught up there. We have another member, past president, who teaches at Woodcraft. Does the same thing in our club for free for the members. And our dues to help support the club, it's a whole $50 a year to support, and you get access a couple of days a month to lathes like these. Most of our members, if not all of them, have their own lathes at their house. So we're not a maker's space where you could come in and rent time on a lathe or get time on a lathe, and if somebody wants to get into it, you can start out just that 1 or 2 days a month, but that's like learning to play tennis by going out 1 day a week and just hitting ball for half an hour and saying, okay, I'm going to be, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to challenge Serena. It's not going to happen. But you can find out whether you like to do that kind of thing. Any other questions? If not, if you guys want to come up and you can get up close and personal and see what's going on, and it's safe. Oh, thank you. Thank you.